Okay, let's hop right in. I want to talk to you today about Enneagram memes and games. I want to do sort of a cost benefit analysis, which, by the way, is not a thing I'm trained in. I did a lot of humanities and not very much business, but I think I understand the concept. So I want to start with benefits. What are the benefits of memes, which aim to describe something about an Enneagram type, usually through both a photo and then words beneath, and games, which are something that is now emerging. There's a card game that's currently coming out called Enneagram, which gives each card a number, and each number and card has sort of an action that you could sort of attribute to the Enneagram type. And also, generally, we often talk about, in the Enneagram community, we talk about how people play games with the Enneagram all the time, kind of this sharing of parlor knowledge where you sort of take someone or a type and you start to kind of workshop it together without really engaging with anyone's narrative. It's just sort of engaged with the concepts inherent in each of the types, kind of disembodied and abstracted. So that's the stage on which this is set, and I want to talk about the benefits of that. And what I want to say is that things like Enneagram games and memes are a way to learn information quickly and become a part of a language community. So they have a learning element. They also have a memory element, a communal memory element. They can create a sense of belonging because you understand what others understand in the same way. You're sharing that sort of moment of meaning making. And the nature of this kind of memorization sort of demystifies and simplifies concepts so they're accessible. There's a kind of accessibility that's inherent in these games and memes because they're intentional distillations and simplifications of concepts. And I want to say that those are benefits. They are definitely benefits. Also, games and memes are fun, and laughing together is good. Sometimes laughing together at sort of the absurdity of our collective humanity when it's not sort of hurtful is good. So benefits here. We have simple data transference. We have memory building. We have that it's communal, accessible, perhaps joyful, with laughter. And that if they're done well and with correct information, they gesture at something that's true. And that is the hinge upon which I think the cost element of this arises. When we gesture at something that is true, there's a difference. There are many different ways in which we can gesture at truth. And so if we're accurately representing something about, we might be accurately representing something about someone who is in the room. And then there's a lot more at play. And that's when I think the cost element of this comes up, right? So the first cost, I would say, is that games and memes can never fully describe or show what it is like to be a type, particularly because they're frozen in time moments or behaviors in a rich and multifaceted person. So within the type, they might make sense, but since the person isn't the type and the goal of Enneagram work rests on the idea that there is freedom and meaningful deviation from type, that we can actually in moments discern into behaviors that are not just determined by our fears and desires. That is, we can do something different, which doesn't make us not our type, but makes our behavior not look exactly like our type all the time. In that way, they can never quite capture that element of the Enneagram. That's okay. Not everything can capture every part of everything. I would say another cost, and this is the cost that I'm a bit more wary of, is that these games and these memes are about these types, and these types are about people, and there are people in the room. And the people in the room sometimes get to the room by consent. They came because they came for the memes. They came for the game. They're there. They have said yes to this, and so they want to hear about it. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes people are not ready, or are not ready to hear. They're not ready to hear something generally, or they're not ready to hear it from the person who's saying it or sharing it. And so that's a problem. But then there's another problem, because I think each of these not readiness, or these ways of encountering it, either without consent or with consent, but not from a person. There is also something that happens in Enneagram work, which is that we talk about our deepest fears and desires. And when I work with clients, I encounter over and over that people can name those things, and in naming them, they distance from them, and they don't know exactly what to do with them, although sometimes they're really painful because they're fears that are really real to them, or desires that go unfulfilled. And sometimes they know that, but then sometimes they don't. And when they encounter them, it's really important that they know how to encounter them compassionately, with space creation, and with the knowledge of their own freedom to posture themselves towards that information. And in memes and in games and in the ways that communities interact with them, there simply isn't space for that. And there doesn't necessarily have to be. It's not that I think communities should only use the Enneagram, as we do in the narrative tradition, where we're telling these stories and narratives and creating space for people to be with their hearts and with their bodies as they express the ways that they resonate with these type structures. I know that not all communities can facilitate that, or would want to, or it's not always the right time, and sometimes you just want to talk and learn more about the structures and informations, but sometimes, oftentimes, people encounter the Enneagram and they encounter a lot of pain. They encounter shame. They encounter anxiety. They encounter stress. They encounter anger and frustration, at the very hearing of their tendencies, because it's those tendencies that have kept them from some of the fullest life that they've wanted to live. And sometimes that's coupled with a confusion about what to do with it. And then when there's nothing offered, when it's just information that we're playing around with, it can leave people feeling really stuck. Which is why I think, or stuck and hurt, which is why I think a lot of people who are not into the Enneagram are not into the Enneagram, if they've heard of it before. Because they've encountered it in spaces that aren't about compassion. And when I say compassion, I mean literally compassion, suffering with. Because those are not spaces set up to suffer with people. And that's okay, because once again, not every space is about that kind of thing. But when we bring up this kind of information, we have to know that there is an element of suffering. And we cannot know when another person who is standing in front of us, the thou in front of us, is going to be touched by this kind of information. And I don't want to overblow this, because also if someone is, I believe that people have the capacity to show up and be present immediately after that and say, oh, I'm sorry, can we talk about this? Can I be with you in it? But I think these spaces generally train us not to do that. They train us to trade in information, and not in the way that that information is deeply about our formation, how we've been formed, and our hope for being formed in new ways, forming new neural pathways, as it were. And so that's what I want to say. I want to say that different kinds of information requires different kinds of things of us. And the deeper the information, the more we tread lightly and carefully and lovingly with the people around us who could be affected, who might already be affected by knowing this information, or who are not yet, but might be when they realize the weight of what the information says. And actually we want that for people. We want people to have that experience because we want people to wake up. But playing games like this isn't necessarily a nice way to wake up, or it's not the best way for helping us wake up. Or if we already are waking up, it can kind of just be annoying and frustrating and limiting to the process. So I hope I've communicated myself clearly about this. And I actually prefer not to monologue about these things. And so I would love it if you want to send any questions or comments about what I've said so that I can help clarify. Because there were even a couple moments as I was speaking where I thought, I hope people don't think that's what I mean. Or, yeah. And lastly, I just want to say it's important to also be in the lightness of this, and the laughter. So with my coaching clients, there have been moments where someone I'm coaching is crying. I mean, they're crying as they encounter the pain of their type. And then within a couple minutes, we're laughing because that laughter is a way of lightheartedly holding this pain. But I think there's something important about spaces being able to do both of those things. And I do not encounter the meme and game world as a place where suffering can happen. And so, as long as we make sure that we are also training people in the Enneagram with spaciousness, where anything that emerges is okay, and that they can have whatever kind of reaction to this information they want to have, then good. But I do think there's costs and benefits here, and I think we need to be more overt in the way that we engage with the Enneagram. And that's what we start to do when we grow up, right? So this is just the pedagogue in me. You can't be overt about your methodology at first when you're using things like the Enneagram because you don't know it well enough to know what it's capable of. But once you know what it's capable of, once you've encountered it in particular ways, then it becomes harder to teach it and engage it in some ways because you know that they're not the ways that will lead to transformation. And since it's a tool about transformation, that seems important. And when I say they won't lead to, I mean they're not a part of the process of engaging with it in its fullness. But they might be an entrance point to someone learning information. It's just that information has to be integrated. And when we integrate things, we integrate it in a certain way. And games and memes are not about integration. So that's what I want to say. And I have so much more to say. But that'll be that for now because, wow, 13 minutes and 30 seconds. That's a lot of time. So if you made it this far, congratulations. And please send me your thoughts and your questions. I would love to interact with you because I think there's a lot more to be said here.